And we are live. All right. Thank you to everyone who is joining us for this episode of Office Hours with Dr. Swathi. This is sponsored by the MSL Academy, which is an educational and mentorship platform, particularly for people who are interested in transitioning from their current jobs in healthcare or clinical care or research to being an MSL or medical science liaison. So I know some people who RSVP'd want to hear more about what they can do to transition, and then also more specific to today, we are going to be talking about the recent fellowship process and what to do if you did not land a fellowship this time around. So yeah, would love to hop right into the topic. So we have a guest today. Our guest is Libby Shelton, or Dr. Libby. So could you give a little background on you, and then also so both your corporate job and then what you do on the side?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Super excited to be back on Office Hours with you and getting to have this conversation and dive into it. Like Dr. Swathi mentioned, I am Libby Shelton. I am obviously clearly a PharmD by background, but I work in industry now. I am an oncology training manager. So I support our field-facing teams and getting them up to speed on all things oncology, in addition to the skills that they need to go out and do well with their customer engagements. So that's kind of what my day job looks like. On the flip side of that, my 5 to 9, if you want to call it, is I run Learn with Libby. So I am the CEO of Learn with Libby, and over there I support pharmacy students and recent grads with various resources to balance their multiple identities from who they are as a person, as a learner, whether that be in an academic setting or as someone transitioning from student to professional, and then also just professional development. So, how to build those skills you need to have a successful career in pharmacy, whatever that may look like to each individual. So, that's my
Amazing.
passion.
Oh, that's great. I love that. And mentorship is such an important part of my kind of path and everything so far, too. So we definitely are on the same page there. So yeah, what we wanted to focus tonight's session on is particularly for the PharmD students or even the PhD students who have recently applied to fellowship programs. The cycle, like the kind of normal cycle, the conventional cycle, has officially ended, but there is still off-cycle applications and things like that that are going on. So we wanted to focus tonight's session to talk about some strategies. I think like as much as yes, that's the initial focus, you can also apply a lot of what we're going to say tonight, likely to, if you didn't end up getting a residency, what you can do next steps. Maybe you applied to a number of jobs that you're so excited about and you haven't heard back yet. Or maybe you're like looking to start this process of like transitioning and doing something different. I think a lot of what we're going to talk about can be applied to all of those things. And we want to make this session as engaging as possible. So any questions that you have, please do not hesitate to put them in the chat. We have the chat window open right now, so we're both monitoring it so we can answer any questions. I think so. We actually prepared a few questions of our own, so we're going to start chatting, but we will pause our questions the second we see something come in the chat, because we want to make this experience as helpful as it can be. And I think even before we go directly into some of the prepared, questions and things you want to talk about, I can give you a little background on me also. And I think you'll understand after I give my kind of spiel why this topic is so important to me. So, oh my gosh, I don't want to make the story so long, but I'm a PharmD also. And pretty much like even before I applied to pharmacy school, I was like, I want to be in pharma. I grew up in New Jersey and was like, okay, a lot of the pharmacists I knew like either had their own companies, they were innovators, they were in entrepreneurship, or they were innovating and doing really cool stuff in pharma. So I like always viewed pharmacy as a super like innovative path that had a lot of different, potential careers. And so once I got to pharmacy school, I was like, okay, I want to position myself to do a fellowship. Once I found out that was like a thing I could do, I was like, I want to do a fellowship. So I I did the rotations, I got the internships, I did the research, like you name it. I was on a national board of SNAFA. Like I did all the things that I thought would like set me up for success. And I went through the fellowship process. So the normal fellowship process, this is like a little, dating myself a little, but this is, way back when it was like all in person. Like there weren't, virtual interviews. But yeah, so prep for mid-year, went to mid-year, felt really prepared, felt great about the process, had done a lot of networking before I got there, ended up getting, to like invited to 4 on-sites, had great experiences, and then I didn't get a fellowship. So like, as someone who's been through the exact process as so many of you listening, and through, the experience of being like, oh my gosh, I literally thought that this is exactly what I was going to do after I graduated. And then being in the position in literally early February of, of however many years ago that I will not mention, it is like, it just like that feeling of being like, oh my gosh, I set myself up and this is what I thought I was going to do. And then I didn't get a fellowship. I was just like, I don't really know what to do now. And especially at that point, everyone who I had like kind of networked with and everything, they all had gotten a fellowship. So they didn't really have a lot of like awesome advice on like what you should do if you didn't get one. And so that's, kind of what led me to, I ended up doing a residency. And then after the residency, I still ended up doing a fellowship, but kind of a bit in a different order. But it really helped. And I love the experience I ended up having, because that clinical experience really did position my fellowship experience, and now I can put it all together and be in this like hyper specialized niche where I still get to do medical affairs, medical communication sort of work, but just in like a different kind of therapeutic area, if you will. So I couldn't be happier with the way that my path ended up. But it definitely, if you had told me when I was like in my final year doing interviews that this is where I would end up and like what I'd be doing, kind of going the more unconventional route, I would have not believed you at the time. So anyways, that's why, just giving a little background, that's why like I'm really excited about this topic, because it's something that I went through personally. Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
I love that you were able to share that. And I think you had like a really good point at the end there. Just like we have these plans and we think things are gonna happen a certain way, and then they don't. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? Like great opportunities can still come even though it didn't go the way you planned. And so I think keeping that mindset alive in the midst of all the things that life will throw at us.
Yeah, and I mean, like, just treating every experience as a learning experience, because I will say, like, I learned so much from prepping for interviews and doing so many fellowship interviews and everything, that it was, I feel like that I still fall back on so many of the strategies and things I learned for preparing for all of those interviews, even now, like applying to jobs and networking and, doing a bunch of different things. I'm like, wow, I still think about, the tell me about yourself and like how to position your story and the through line and all of these things still. So yeah, I just treat everything like something that you can learn from. And also learning experiences don't need to always be like all positive and all negative, because sometimes you learn also through these different experiences what you actually really like to do, which like speaks to one bit of advice that I always give students is like, or students or even like early career or otherwise, it's like you have to be willing to try something, because at the very minimum then you can be like, okay, I tried it and I really liked this aspect, but I actually really didn't care for this aspect, and then it helps you just make a more educated decision.
Absolutely. I'm already thinking of some examples where.
Ooh, do you want to share?
Yeah. So one of the things that I experienced just talking on so I did do a fellowship right after pharmacy school. And so once you become a fellow at a lot of companies, you then end up interviewing. And so one of the things that I learned from that experience is like interviewing people now. So that was like another skill that I gained from the process on the other side of things. And that truly is like a differentiator when you ask someone like, okay, like why industry? Why is that of interest to you? And when they didn't have a really strong answer because they hadn't tried things or explored, or they couldn't come up with a good story as to like why industry made sense. Like one of the responses I received was, well, I don't like giving vaccines at my community pharmacy job. And it was like, but what do you like about industry? And so I think regardless of if you go a fellowship or residency or whatever route, having a strong why as to why you're doing that versus you just didn't want to do something else or you didn't want to go that route. So I think having that strong personal connection as to why it makes sense for you is really, really important.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, that's great. So, you know, as we're thinking about our audience, people listening, this could apply to like a PharmD student who didn't secure a fellowship. It could also apply to someone who's trying to, you know, transition into industry. Let's say that like they didn't secure that fellowship or they didn't get the job after interviewing, or they're sending out applications and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm just like not getting any traction right now." What is the first thing you would encourage them to do mentally and strategically before taking the next step?
I think you kind of just have to collect yourself a bit. Rejection isn't easy, like no one likes it. You can learn a lot from it, but like I think personally for me, I always say I got to feel my feelings first. And so I usually give myself like 24 hours. I have to feel my feelings. And then like I can move forward. The other thing that I would say is specifically for those going through students where everyone starts posting on social media at the same time about who got what and where they're going. I think it's a really exciting time to celebrate those around you, but sometimes it can be a little hard to be there for others when you may be struggling yourself. So I think also like no one needs my permission, but like take time to step away from social media if that's what you need to do, especially match day will be coming in the upcoming weeks and all of those things. And so being able to take a break from social media if that's something that you need and if that's helpful for you mentally. I think once you can kind of collect yourself and get your bearings and know that you will still be successful, even though you have been met with rejection and this challenge, it's just something to overcome and like you will overcome it. I think the other thing after you kind of done those pieces is just to reflect on the experience. What have you been doing? And how far have you been getting in the process? So I think with fellowship applications, a lot of times if you're submitting an application, and I guess this applies for jobs too, but I can't really speak to that experience as much. If you're applying for something and you don't get that screening interview, that means there was something with the application that wasn't quite a good fit. And so then it's like, okay, you need to focus on adjusting your application. How can you work on this application so that it's more tailored to the actual role, the position, the things that you're going for, the opportunities that you're going for? If you made it to a first round, a second round, what have you, then it was something in those specific rounds that needs tailoring. So I think being able to reflect and think like, oh, what happened during those pieces maybe will give you a place to kind of start. I think also being able to ask for feedback. If it's maybe if you've submitted a bunch of applications and you haven't heard anything back, then you might not be able to ask the person who's been screening your application, but reach out to folks. LinkedIn's a great tool. I love it. Reach out to folks who can review your application, provide you with any feedback. I think having another perspective from someone who knows what the other side is looking for is extremely helpful. Or if you have had some interviews, being able to reach out to the person who interviewed you and ask, what feedback do you have for me? Really appreciate the time and the opportunity to interview, but would love to know how I can improve for future opportunities that may come my way. I think it goes to show not only that you have a growth mindset, but that's extremely valuable because that's a time that you were in doing the thing. You were having that experience. So it wasn't like a mock interview. It was truly the real deal. And so you can get that feedback from others. And so I think that's the first piece that I would suggest. And then just leaning into your network. I think people are more than willing to help and support you, but they cannot do that unless they know what you're looking for, what you need, and how they can help or support you. So I'll stop there because I've been talking a lot, and I'm sure you have other
Definitely.
things
No,
to add.
I agree with everything you said, like the reflection component. like thinking about who in your network can support you and asking the people, you know, whether it's in your network or, you know, continuing to expand your network of like, you know, who is someone, if they're not in my currently in my network, who is someone I could potentially reach out to, and start creating that relationship for the future. I think
Absolutely.
would be great. But I think like to respond to the question of like what you would do immediately, I love the idea of like reflection. And then the next step after that, I would probably say like look to your network and everything. Yeah, absolutely. What about like some common mistakes that you see, given that you've, you know, been mentoring students for so long? You know, what do you commonly see? You know, let's say if someone doesn't get a fellowship or they don't get a residency or things don't work out exactly as they hope. What are some things that maybe some people listening can avoid?
I think it can be challenging when you know that so school is ending soon, you need to find something like your next step. And so I think having that deadline can put pressure on others and it can be very stressful. But I still think there's an opportunity to be intentional about how you approach the situation versus the grasping at straws. I think when we start doing that and just kind of like applying all over the place and not having a clear why or story, I think it hurts more than it helps. Because when you go to interview and when people are reviewing your application, they want to see that this next step makes sense for you. And if that doesn't come through clearly, that might be a reason why you're not considered. And so making sure you're doing all that you can to move forward in that process and actually obtain the opportunity, I think is really important. So that's one of the things I see. Or because I know you said you were in New Jersey, the land of pharma, and that's where I currently live. But being like from the Midwest and going to a school that didn't talk a whole lot about pharma or industry at all, residency was obviously seen as like the best option. And so a lot of times I see students immediately being like, I am throwing this industry thing in the trash and we're going residency full all the way. And I don't think there's anything wrong with doing a residency. Like, I think that's a great opportunity. But I think when you go for it just because you think that like that's the only thing that you can do next, I think again, it's not taking the time to fully like reflect and think about like where you want to be and having that story because they're still going to look for that in the interviews. And so I think having a good story where you can explain how this fits into your career path is just really important. And I think again, not asking for feedback too. I think that's a missed opportunity, especially if you did get some interviews. Even if you know you didn't hear back from them until the end of the process, I still think it's valuable. A lot of times they take notes, so someone can look back at those notes and see kind of what they thought or their perception of you, and that's helpful just to know how you're being perceived by others. So those are like the two
Definitely.
things.
Yeah, I agree. And so this is like more specifically for students, you know, should they consider off-cycle fellowship opportunities that make sense for them, or should they be considering like pivoting into another entry into industry? So like thinking about like entry-level jobs, should they like what should they be considering now? And of course, like I guess the short version of the answer is like, well, it depends on the person, of course. But like, you know, if we're thinking about like what opportunities are out there, you know, what should students be realistically pursuing?
Yeah, I'd love to hear your take on this too. But I
Mhm.
think the one thing is weighing like the pros and cons. Right, with a fellowship, you're still receiving like it's a structured training experience. You're getting lots of exposure to different things. The pay and compensation is a bit lower. So I think taking that into account, if that's still something that like you really are interested in that structured learning experience and you're willing to sacrifice the pay that comes with it, on the other hand of things, entry level roles, I feel like lately they've been a little bit harder to come by, like
I
true entry
agree.
level roles.
Mhm.
Um, so that's something to consider. I think the pay is much nicer with those roles than with fellowship or training opportunity. So I think that's something to consider. A lot of times I've seen more opportunities, not necessarily within pharma or biotech, but more so in like adjacent. opportunities with either agencies for medical writing or marketing, life science consulting, some like managed care type organizations. I've seen a lot of that, clinical research organizations. And so I think those are a good way to get a lot of experience in those organizations and then potentially transfer to the client side of things, which would be a pharma biotech type company. So those are some of the things that I would just consider, like what are the pros and cons to both. There are opportunities out there. I think it's can be a little bit more challenging to connect with some of the entry level roles, but not impossible. I've seen it done many times before. And usually that's a result of doing some heavy networking. So that's what I would definitely advise. But off-site fellowships are good too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's all about weighing the pros and cons and what makes the most sense for you. I think from at least what I've seen, a lot of people who end up getting entry-level jobs, it's because they have a network of someone in their family, or maybe they've done an internship at that company or an internship at another company, and then that director was friends with another director, and then like it's kind of just becomes a networking conversation. I think breaking into a direct, like, not what am I saying, not direct, but an entry-level job without like the networking component, I think would be, I mean, I think it'd be kind of impossible, but perhaps other people have done it. I haven't seen it being done, but I think it's possible. I love that you brought up all the kind of tangential industry stuff that like no one talks about. Honestly, that would be a really good 1-hour session that maybe we could consider. Because if I had known about those, oh boy, I would have been all over it. All of like the other opportunities of like, I guess a short version of how to describe it is like the vendors that pharma works with. So it's like everyone from the CROs, so the companies that are actually running the clinical trials, and then the personnel in pharma or clinical development, clinical operations, like they're the ones kind of facilitating and overseeing it, but really like the nitty gritty is for the most part done by CROs. And then as you mentioned, like agencies, so these could be like medical affairs or medcoms agencies. And some of them are even like kind of life science marketing agencies as well. Those are awesome and a great way to get experience. And I know so many people that started off on that side and have transitioned either into pharma, into biotech, or like doing something else completely unconventional. That's really cool. And then I also love that you brought up like consulting in general. So this could be like kind of the quintessential like management consulting. Like I know ZS has a bunch of like life sciences focused roles. And then of course like the like McKinsey's and Deloitte's. And actually I don't know if Deloitte has life sciences, to be honest, but definitely the McKinsey.
That's a good question.
Yeah, because I've definitely networked, because I had an era of my life where I was like, oh, is that something I'm interested in? So I started networking. Oh wait, how fun. Oh my God, we should definitely do that session actually. Because then we could like kind of break down all the different types of roles. Like we could even think about like talking about some of the pros and cons from our perspective. Yeah, I think that would be really interesting. Just to like provide more opportunity to people like who are interested in like transitioning into something that's not kind of more like specific to like research, academia, or healthcare, or like clinical care rather. Yeah, I think that would be really interesting. But I pretty much will echo everything that you said, and that there's so many other pathways. If like, let's say medical affairs or the MSL role or something is something that you want to do, absolutely. To start off with those, you end up, because those are the vendors for pharma, you get to create relationships with people in pharma and biotech. And then like some of those relationships could turn into job opportunities, or they could just turn into a great way to build your network for like your next step, whatever that might be. I will say those are probably some of these other industries like CROs and like agencies and stuff. Maybe not management consulting, uncertain, but definitely those two, CROs and agencies, I definitely think are a bit easier to break into a direct entry sort of. I don't know why I keep calling it like direct entry, but the like entry level sort of positions, those are like a bit easier to break into. But I mean, again, like pros and cons, like some of those roles are fully remote. Some require like moving to New York City. For some people, they're like, oh my gosh, I would never want to do that. And for other people, that's exciting. On both sides, the remote and the New York City thing. So But then also like agencies and CROs tend to pay less. So if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm looking for like the trajectory of like making this and then like, you know, getting a raise and all that good stuff, it is like harder to kind of quote unquote climb the ladder financially in that way. But I mean, one would argue, even though you're doing a fellowship and you're getting that additional kind of hands-on training and you're getting paid less, I think that, I don't know if you can speak directly to this, but I think that kind of jump starts a lot of the, oh no, oh goodness. Sorry, I just got a notification that there was an issue with the stream, but I think it's okay now. So the other, no, but what I was saying is that I do think that like doing the fellowship just does jumpstart your career in a way, because it just gives you the extra breadth to be able to use your position as a fellow to not only do your role, but also to network as a part of your job. Whereas if you are entry level, I think that is something that would be a little bit of like out of scope of what your team would expect. So yes, that is to say, pros and cons of all the things, but yeah, I think doing a session on other opportunities and like unconventional roles where you still get to utilize so much of like the clinical knowledge we're taught in school, but get to use it in a different way, I think would be really cool. Yeah. Okay, so what about like, you know, thinking about these candidates, people who are listening in, I can see the number of people listening, there are a lot of people listening, so they definitely want to know this information. So what types of roles or experiences do you think can meaningfully strengthen a candidate's profile in this kind of like in-between period? Because they're like, okay, well, I applied to these fellowships and I got, you know, to this certain stage in the fellowship process, but I didn't end up getting the job. So what can they do to be competitive for like off cycle or for like entry level or other things we talked about?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always recommend for fellowship candidates, I think one, doing more mock interviews, I think that always helps in the meantime to really strengthen those skills. I don't think you can ever interview too much, if I'm being honest, because everyone has a different style, different types of questions, and the more you do it, like the easier it gets. Like I remember being like so shocked at how much growth I had just going through the interview process, because going through all, like, the more you do, you just get so good at it and you realize each question sort of fits in different buckets and whatnot. So I think in the meantime, still staying like sharp with your interview skills. The other thing that I would recommend is continue networking, regardless if it's for a fellowship or off cycle. I think one, having a better understanding of what you're applying for is just really good. We talked a little bit about it before, but one thing that I was kind of able to do in my interviews was talk about why I wanted that specific role that I was applying for, which was mostly in like commercial marketing. That's what I was looking for. But then I was able to talk about how it works with all the other functional areas as well, because I was just networking with other people and I wanted to understand what their role was, but I also wanted to understand how they worked with their commercial and marketing partners. And so I think when you have that and you can bring that and offer that during an interview too, you become a stronger candidate. So if you are going for whether it's off-cycle fellowship applications and being able to like strengthen your interview through that way, is really, really good opportunity as well. But even if you're going for something entry level as well, understanding the other people you may be working with, and having a better understanding of even the role that you're applying for, I think can help you level up a bit.
Definitely. That's one of the things I was going to bring up too for this question is informational interviews. I love that you took it from the vantage point of like, not only like you, let's say you want a medical affairs job, not only getting informational interviews in medical affairs, but also like most of the departments work pretty cross-functionally. So I love the idea of talking to other departments as well, so you can kind of understand what they're doing and how that particular role fits in the schema of the entire organization. That's a great idea. So yeah, I think informational interviews can apply to like not only the department or the functional area that you're interested in, it could apply to other ones. The other thing, like if you could potentially get some sort of additional experience, that would be awesome. So maybe you have like you know, maybe from your networking, like I can, you know, name some people that I know in my network who they have a full-time job in medical affairs, but they actually also do like fun side
Mm.
interesting things. Like if is there a way that you could potentially help them with a project? Again, like the goal here is not to make money, right? The goal here is to like get the experience, because I definitely have had some conversations with students who are like, "Oh, but it's an unpaid internship." It's like, "Yeah, but the experience that you can get from it is like I did so many unpaid things when I was a
Yes.
student just to like be able to get the experience and put it on my
Uh-huh.
resume and then be able to talk about it on an interview." So I definitely think that that is just invaluable. So if from networking you're like, oh, I see that on their LinkedIn they have this other like LLC or this other startup or they're doing this other work, like that could be a cool opportunity. I think like for field-based roles, if that's something you're interested in, being able to do like a ride along or
Mhm.
like some sort of like in-person engagement, that would be really cool. And that's like also a way as you're networking to be like, okay, like am I networking with people who like live close to me? Because then it
Mhm.
becomes more of like a, oh, like I'll take them out for coffee, maybe they'll invite me to do something together. And then you kind of get a little more of insight,
Yeah.
especially like when you are asked that question, like why this role, it's like actually I did a ride along and you know
Mhm.
I got this insight, so like initially this is like what I knew about it and this is what I learned and you know this is what I want to do and you know blah blah blah. So there are like other ways where you can learn more and get more experience, and it doesn't have to be like a quintessential, you know, like insert company here internship for 4 months on site,
Mhm.
you know, sort of a thing. There are other ways to get really good experience and the informational interviews. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to putting yourself out there. You
Yeah,
have to be
that's
willing
very
to put yourself
true.
out there and ask for it.
Hmm. Definitely. So I feel like the last time we had our chat, we pretty much only talked about networking because we both love that topic. So if you all want to hear more about that, definitely the recording is up. It should still be on LinkedIn. If it's not, you can definitely go to the MSL Academy's YouTube page or the MSL Insider podcast. So we have the recording everywhere. It's such good stuff. So if you want to check that out, definitely do that. But you know, I can't not have a conversation without talking about networking. So I'm like, okay, how can we position like some networking strategies specifically for people who are in this in between time? Like, how would you answer that?
Yeah, I think finding people who have done what you aspire to do. So that kind of goes off of reaching out to the folks who are in medical affairs, if that's something you're pursuing, or the PharmDs that are in marketing or PhDs that have done that. So finding folks using, LinkedIn search is great. So using it to find folks who have a similar path as you and learning from them. I think also, like when I had just got on LinkedIn, I was only connecting with PharmDs because I was like, they at least understand where I'm coming from. So that's always one of my pieces of advice. I would also say when you reach out, just include a note about where you're at. I think again, people are more than willing to help, and if you include like I applied to fellowships, wasn't successful. If you feel comfortable sharing that, I know not everyone may feel comfortable sharing that, so up to your discretion. But if you feel comfortable sharing that, I think it also helps people understand where you're at and what you're trying to achieve. And like I did go through the process. You want to improve, you want to get better, and you see yourself pursuing these opportunities. I think is helpful. And I was like, ooh, I'm losing my train of thought. It's getting late.
No, but I love everything that you brought up. I think that's great, and I love that you were talking about that when you initially started networking, you were only looking for PharmDs because then like they would understand. I would actually take that even to the next level of like try to find some sort of common ground. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be every single time. Like it could be someone who's in medical affairs in the specific therapeutic area that you're interested in. Maybe they don't have a PharmD, but at least like you're
Yeah.
interested in that therapeutic area, or maybe they went to college in the same city where you went to
Yes.
college, or maybe they have in there about me that they like love knitting and you're obsessed, and maybe there's
Yeah.
something where you can create that common ground. I mean, this also definitely applies to interviews of like, you know, when you figure out who your interviewer is, to be able to like creep on them on the internet, and find out good information that you can potentially work into the conversation to be like, oh, like I saw like, that you went to school here or something like that. And then there's like some sort of common ground. But beyond that, don't be afraid to send a message to someone you have zero mutual connections with, because it all starts from having zero, and then eventually that person says yes, and then you end up having mutual connections eventually. So would never be afraid of sending, a message like that when you don't have any mutual connections. And also, like, always keep in mind, I probably said this like every single time I hop on LinkedIn Live, but always keep in mind that people are busy, and if they don't respond, I bet you money on the table, it is not personal, because they are busy, and they might, like see your invitation, and then they might open your profile for a second, click accept, and then just like see your message come through and then be like, oh, I'll respond later. And then they just like forget, or like some people just don't check LinkedIn that often.
Yeah.
So they literally might respond 4 months later, right? So I would not take it personally, but I do think that just the willingness to, I guess to your point, to put yourself out there is really important. I think this also applies, like, let's say you're applying to like an entry-level job, applying and sending an application, like your portfolio that has like a resume and cover letter that are optimized for that position, of course, is very important. But I always say like half of the role is, or half of getting the role is applying with that application. And the second half is trying to find someone to advocate for you internally. So like the second you apply to, insert company here is like, okay, let me go on LinkedIn and see, am I connected to literally anyone? And it could be like a random dude that you had lab with, your second year of pharmacy school that you haven't caught up with. But now they transitioned after doing residency, and they, like work in industry, and you can be like, oh, wait, I'm applying to a role in industry. Like, this is a moment for you to reconnect and for you to just like, pick their brain on their experience so far. And then if you get an interview, then it's like when they ask you like, why this company, it's like, actually, I went to school with a dude who like actually is an MSL on the team, and he absolutely loves it. So I got like kind of insider feedback that like, it even like strengthened my opinion of like why I want to be a part of this team specifically, not just like any MSL team, right? So there's like, you have to be able to draw not only that, like, have the kind of like quantitative skills and everything on your resume, and have those be displayed in a way that's going to make sense to a hiring manager at HR. But you also need to pair that with having some sort of connection to the company. Also, I will caveat that with, I know I'm talking a lot, but I will caveat that with, it does not need to be someone who works on the MSL team. It could literally be like someone from your network who maybe you went to high school with, you're connected on LinkedIn, and then you see that they're like in the marketing department or commercial, or they're like in pharmacovigilance, but you're not interested in that. That's totally fine. Because then when you get the question of why do you want to be at the company, you say, oh, I connected with this person, and they told me, like, even if from a different functional area perspective, that like they love the company for XYZ reason. Then I looked into the mission, vision, and values and was like, whoa, I fully agree, right? So there's still like a story and something that you can put together there through creating that connection.
Absolutely. I wanted to go back to what you said about like not having mutual connections with someone and like putting yourself out there. 100%. I would also say when you meet new people and you have these informational interviews, I always just like to ask, is there anyone else you think I should connect with? Based on like what I've shared, my interests, what I'm looking for. And then you will have lots of mutual connections that way. So that was one of the things I thought about as you were talking.
Definitely. That's something I learned way too late. And I really wish I had learned that earlier, of like, is there anyone else that you'd love, that you think I should connect with? Because then you end up like getting like a warm intro from one cold intro, which is so much better. To have like someone already kind of like being like, okay, I chatted with them, like they don't suck, like I'll definitely introduce them to someone else in my network. So that's great. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would
amazing.
also say, don't use that question if you're not like really vibing with someone. because it can get kind of uncomfortable. So that's just another caveat. As you said that, I thought about some other times and I was like, ooh, I'm not going to ask anyone for, like, we're not really vibing during this conversation. I will not ask for anything else from them. So,
Oh my God, absolutely. And wait, and on that note, are there any other like, oh my God, like red flags, like things that you shouldn't be doing when you're networking?
I always say, like, when you're networking, you have to humanize. I know when you're in this transitional period, and you're really looking for that next opportunity, or whether it be an opportunity to build your skills so that you can go for the next opportunity, I think you still have to connect with people as people. So, like you mentioned, finding that common ground with them or something you can relate to them on, that's not so focused on like what they do and work, but really like connects them as a person, I think is key. So that's the one thing that I would say is like a red flag. I remember there was like one informational call I got on, and it was like rapid fire questions for an hour, and we didn't talk about anything other than like my job. And there was also like, there wasn't really a conversation. There was no back and forth. It was just the rapid fire questions, and I was like, okay, like, I mean, I hope this was helpful, but like, I don't know the other person on the other side of this conversation, or like, I don't know anything about them, or like we didn't really get to connect. So it wasn't like a conversation, like, or someone I was like really looking forward to meeting to the next time, because it really just felt like rapid fire interview, versus that
Well,
human
and
connection.
exactly. And that sounds like, well, first and foremost, that sounds like exactly what I used to do when I was starting to do informational interviews. Because
Same.
I was like, I want to show up prepared. I don't want them to think I'm wasting their time. So I would be like, ask for 15 minutes, and I would literally put in 10 questions in 15 minutes. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
so extra about it. But because I wasn't viewing it as like, how can we mutually help one another?
Yes.
I was viewing it as like, oh my gosh, they're on like a whole different level than me. Like I can't consider relating on a human level because I just like didn't put it into that context.
Yes.
I was like, oh my God, they are where I want to be. I'm putting them on a pedestal. Therefore, like I'm gonna try to learn from them and not even like consider them a human, which definitely don't do that. And I've learned from that. But
We learn
I
from our mistakes, because I've been there too.
definitely, and was like, yeah, but it definitely have learned a lot from that. And I definitely agree. And it's at the end of the day, like when someone agrees to chat with you for an informational interview or otherwise, like you really have to come at it as like, okay, like they might help me, but also how can I help them?
Yes.
And that's a great way to like keep in touch later and be like, oh yeah, you mentioned that you like love, lilies, and I saw like this, image of a lily. That's like a terrible example, but like that like that sort of equivalent, like the professional equivalent of that, of like, oh, I like, oh, maybe a better example is like you mentioned that you're in like a certain therapeutic area and you see an article or something comes up in class where you're like, oh wait, I feel like they would love that, right? So then you can like just send and be like, hey, this came up in class, thought you'd appreciate it, hope you're well, like something like that, like even if it's a few months later. That's a much better example. So yeah, it's like there's a way to like continue fostering that like real relationship between people. And then I mean, like I think back to some of those initial conversations I had, and I'm like, wow, I could still be in touch with so many of these, like at the time I was a student, they were a fellow, and I was like, wow, that was like kind of a lost opportunity. So yeah, please learn from us.
That's what we're here for.
Yes, definitely. So, looking back at students that you've seen succeed after this initial setback, like what patterns and behaviors do you see that they share that others can learn from?
I think it's kind of self-explanatory, but like just being resilient. They're not, yes, so I'm like thinking of the right way to word this. they they don't take like no for an answer, so they're like resilient but also persistent. And it's not the fact that they're like they won't accept that they didn't get a fellowship and they're in denial. It's not that piece. It's just they recognize that not getting a fellowship, like that's not the only way that they can be successful. So they will find another path, another way, and they will continue exploring and searching and being curious about how they can do that. I think the other thing is they take feedback really well. So when someone's like, "Hey, this is one of your areas of improvement," they're like, okay, got it. Now I have something that, like, I know what to work on. How am I going to work on it? So I think they move forward with that and really just try to like learn from the experiences. And I think the other thing is really just putting themselves out there and going for it. They're not afraid to try. I know failure doesn't always feel great, but they're not afraid to try again. Like I'm thinking of one candidate that she wasn't able to land a fellowship, and she was like, "Okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna try to get some additional experience." So she did some additional like education. She got a job working at like a consulting to kind of continue to build up her CV and her application. Applied to fellowships the next time around, and she was successful. So I think that resilience of she was still putting herself out there, still going for it, working on the things she knew she needed to work on, and continue to move forward with it.
Amazing. Yeah, I fully agree. We actually have a great question in the chat. So it's a little long, but I think it's great. So I'm going to read the whole thing. So thanks so much for your time. Oh, so nice. So my question pretty much asks, and says, like, I'm a big believer in that, everything happens for a reason. But I wanted to ask if there was anything in the fellowship process you think, that you would have done differently, or places that you may have went that you didn't expect. So I think they're more or less asking, like, like, are there things like you would have done different in the fellowship process? Wow. Like, do we have an hour? I have so many things to say about that. I have so many things to say about that. I was viewing it from, I viewed like, because at that time I had had experience and I had been talking to so many different fellows across so many different functional areas. I was like, wait, I see the pro and I'm interested in so many different ones that I had not narrowed down, which I think is like not smart. But I kind of viewed it as like, there are certain companies, like I viewed it as more of like, I want to be in certain therapeutic areas and I want to be at certain companies because of like certain things that they were innovating on or things they were known for. So I was not prioritizing functional areas, and I think that ended up like kind of kicking me in the booty a little bit, because like, but what I would do is with certain programs, like there's like RPIF and there's Northeastern and stuff like that, with each like kind of set of programs like per school, I would apply to like a different functional area because they would have different companies I'd be interested in. So here I am thinking, oh my gosh, like I'm going based on like the therapeutic area I like, or I'm going based off like some sort of cool like new product. Oh my god, like CAR T was big at the time, and I was like, oh my god, I want to do CAR T stuff. So anyways, like I was very into like certain things, but the one thing that I didn't expect is that the life and world of the fellows is very small, and so everyone starts talking, and so they're like, wait, so you're interviewing her for that? So I like didn't know that until after, whereas they were like, oh wait, she's a top candidate for this, but it's like, wait, she's a candidate for this. And so it actually ended up being a problem. Whereas I thought I was like kind of delineating and splitting out pretty well. And I also had talked to so many fellows, which like I do think it's great to talk to fellows. But the issue is that when I was talking to each of those fellows, like I was asking them very specific questions about their functional area. So a lot of fellows got to know my name because I was talking to a lot of them, and they thought like she doesn't know what she wants because she's talking to all these different functional areas. And it actually ended up, my extraness actually ended up hurting me a little bit because I had like kind of over strategically thought about it. But maybe that's just like my personality though, because I was like, there's so many pros I see about different functional areas that it was very hard for me to like just select one. So if I were to do it again, I would only do one functional area, and I would only do like, I would focus more on like honing in on a functional area and like a why there versus like why a therapeutic area or why a particular like company or innovative product. And then I also heard that certain functional areas were like easier to break into. And so I was also like a bit more on the strategy side of like, wait, I actually really like this aspect of this functional area, so I'll apply to that. And yeah, so I would say don't be like me. And the second time I did the fellowship process, I did it completely differently based on that, where I only applied to, one functional area. And then I only applied to, like, I still did the thing where I only applied to certain companies that I really liked. I also was very much on, like, I only wanted to be at like a small company and be like one of the first fellows in a program because I wanted to be able to build it. So I really liked that too. So I don't know. I mean, I have like so many things to say about that, of like what I definitely should not have done. I think the short version of what I'm trying to say is like figure out like what you really want and try to do a lot of that research through like now the many YouTube videos and the many TikToks and the many everything that's already out there before you start engaging with a bunch of people who are actually going to be decision makers in the next step of your life. And not reach out until you have a pretty good idea of like what exactly you want to do, because the entire world is very small.
Yes. Pharma is very small. I can definitely agree to that. I know one of my mentors, she always says, she's like, it's good to reach out to fellows ahead of time, but like be intentional about that because it can hurt you more than it will like help you.
Yep.
Because if you had a good conversation, it was good, like great. If they're now talking and everyone knows your name, questionable. as you mentioned. Like, so yeah. I think for me, I think the process is just like I didn't realize before getting into it and having like multiple mentors and coaches throughout the process how strategic you have to be. And so I think having good people in your corner who, I mean, they don't necessarily have to have done a fellowship to be a good coach, but like kind of understand industry. And I remember I met with one lady and we just had like, I didn't know who she was. I reached out to her. And she was like, I will be your fellowship Sherpa, what I wish I had. And so she kind of like coached me through the whole process and like what I needed to do. And there were just things like I wasn't thinking about. So having someone like her was, I think, the reason I succeeded. Not that like I didn't do great things, but like I wouldn't have known what to do without her. And like you mentioned, like the YouTube, like there's so many resources out there, like utilize them. Please utilize them.
Yeah, they were not around when I was going through this cycle, but like that's definitely something that I wish that I had access to, is like the opportunity to learn about all this stuff and everything before I did the outreach. But yeah, it's interesting. We kind of both said opposite things, where I was like, oh my God, don't be so strategic. And I think you said to be very strategic, but I think it's like being strategic in the right way.
Yes.
With like who's mentoring you, who is actually helping to guide you. And maybe that's something I should have done a lot better. And if I were to do it again, I would like seek out help from someone directly. The thing is, like, yes, I grew up in New Jersey, but I went to school in South Carolina. So like I didn't really know anyone besides like one person who had done a fellowship and who was like successful at it and everything. But I didn't like call on them to be like my quote unquote Sherpa. I, just kind of like, like talk to them here and there and gave them updates. So that's something that I definitely would have wanted and considered. Yeah. For the future. Definitely. Mm-hmm. Great. So yeah, we're literally coming up to our closing moments. If anyone has any other question, please do not hesitate to put it in the chat. I guess also another part of this person's question, which I think could be super valuable to everyone, is, is there anything else that you would have like kind of added to your experience? Like in terms of like thinking about pharmacy school and like transferable skills and like things that, like fellowship interviewers are looking for. I think, and so I'm asking you this, but I'm going to give my perspective first. So I think that like having a lot of range of variety of experiences is just so valuable, because it really helps you assess, again, like what you like and what you don't like. But also I think it shows that you're curious and you're like willing to try things and you're willing to learn and like kind of get out of your comfort zone and do a little bit of something. And I think that is very beneficial to like, and transferable to being a fellow. Because you might be asked to do things where you're like, I literally don't even know what that acronym means. And that I definitely had that experience when I was a Med Affairs fellow. I was like, what does that mean? But of course, in the meeting, you're like, and then you like look it up
I got
later
it.
because you're like, what is that? So I think there are some aspects of that. The other thing that I mean that's the main thing. I think I don't know why this just popped into my head and it doesn't really apply to this at all, but I feel like it's still valuable to say is that people have lost the art of follow-up. And
Yes.
I can count on one hand because just like you, like once I was a fellow, I did so many interviews. I can count on a singular hand how many people sent a thank you for your time. And it doesn't have to be anything like special or
Yeah.
beautiful. And it's just literally, hey, thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed meeting you. Looking forward to next steps. Literally verbatim, you could send that exact thing. And just the fact that you're sending anything, you will stand out and be in the top like 1 to 2% for sure. And it doesn't have to be thoughtful. It doesn't have to be like, we talked about this specific thing and a thought like, and like adding value. No. It just needs to be a thank you. And even just a thank you that you took in that time to do it. Wow. Like that will actually help. Yeah.
I would 100% agree with that. Like even last night I did a one-on-one with someone and they sent me a thank you email and I was like, whoa.
I know, like every
What?
time it's like alarming. You're like, whoa, oh my gosh. Kind of forgot this was a thing because it's just like so infrequent. People just don't do that.
Yes. But it absolutely like it does make you smile though. And now like that person will forever be tattooed on my brain because they sent a thank you. A thank you and a
Exactly,
follow-up.
exactly.
So I do think it goes
Is
a long
there
way.
absolutely is there anything else that you want to add to the other question of like things you would have done differently in pharmacy school, especially if this person is like, I still have the entire rest of the year left and like looking to build up some skills. Yeah.
Yeah. I just really relate to what you said about just like trying a little bit of everything. Like that was my experience. And I think it's funny because lately I've been sharing this quote that I got. Someone told me when I was going through the fellowship process, and their advice was that pyramids are stronger than skyscrapers. And so it was like collect all sorts of experiences to like build your foundation. And as your career continues, it'll come to a peak and you'll be an expert at something and you'll probably kind of stay in that lane. But if you start and you only have experience in this one area and you just become a skyscraper, easy to topple over. So it kind of goes back to like career stability. And I think it also applies to fellowships and being able to transition to industry in various different roles. And I think there's a piece of being intentional and strategic about how you do that. But I think having the wide variety of experiences, like even if it's not just the organizations you join or the leadership roles you have, but also even in like the appy rotations you take. Like I had the
Yeah.
most random schedule. I was at like a wound clinic. I did med info. Like there wasn't even a pharmacist at the wound clinic. Like it was just one of my professors signed up to do this rotation. So like I only worked with a doctor, but it's just being able and willing to like try these different things and these non-traditional opportunities. Like we talked a little bit about consulting earlier. And so like I did this course on consulting for like 10 weeks or something and did like a project with that. And so I was just doing all sorts of random stuff just to like get exposure and experience. And so um, I think that was one of the things that contributed to like the success is just being willing to try. And you also mentioned like figuring out what you like and what you don't like. I literally had like a T chart and it was like love and don't love and anything in the middle was okay, but I was trying to find more roles that aligned with the things that I loved and wanted to do more of, and was trying to avoid roles that had the things that I did not love and never wanted to do again. So I
Yeah, I
think
love
because
that.
the variety of experience that I had, I was able to do that exercise. And so just try
Definitely.
it all.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that that's so great. And I'm glad you brought up the appy rotations because like that is actually a way that like, especially as I was going through the fellowship process for the first time, I made every single final project of each API rotation apply to Pharma.
Yep.
My community rotation, like literally every single rotation, I was like, okay, like, and at that point, you know, like the first time I went through, I was like, I'm obsessed with these particular companies and these particular like innovative products or MOABs or anything. And I was like, I want to do a project about that. And so like, as I was thinking about like narrowing which fellowships I was applying to, I was like, I'm going to like do a project on this drug and how it was a particular part of this, you know, case study or something, right? Like with this one patient in this one clinic, because then I could talk about it at an interview for a fellowship, right? So it's like, how can you position even experiences where you're like, wow, I don't want anything to do with oncology. It's like, find something in that experience that can then be helpful, and find like something in it that can then be applicable to anything you want to do later. Yeah. Amazing. Well, okay, this was so great. Okay, we're already at time. So thank you to everyone who showed up and for the engagement and everything. This is great. So yeah, if you want to ask us any follow-up questions or anything, definitely feel free to reach out to us via email. Oh wow, not email, via LinkedIn message probably, because I didn't put my email. I'm so used to saying email on webinars and stuff. Yeah, but please feel free to just like send us like either of us like a DM if you want to like chat more or have more specific questions. But yeah, I mean, we love talking about this stuff, and I have so many more things that I can say. And I think we have our idea for our next session as well, which will be great.
We do. Yeah, okay. Looking forward to it.
Yes, definitely. Alrighty, well, have a good night. Bye-bye, everyone.
See ya.